The one that Spectrum hates. That's what we hear. So the word is that, and I saw on the OD today that Spectrum, we've reached out to them several times, and we've gotten nothing back. But the OD did, and they
don't
said,
really talk to me either, Bill. So don't worry about it.
Okay, all right. Well, they're probably used to me complaining about my service. But they're saying they're now running the ads, and that they told you that on Wednesday. Is that true?
That's not true.
Okay.
What happened was, so this all goes back to a few weeks ago when we tried to run an ad on Spectrum. They said, no, we're not going to run the ad. Our lawyers had to reach out to the FCC. The FCC reached out to Spectrum's lawyers. An agreement was made. They're going to run the ad. And then this past Friday, last week, we go to make an ad purchase for this coming week.
Was it? What did it? Was it an anti-Spectrum ad?
No, there was a couple ads. One talked about Spectrum.
Okay.
The others were just responses to some of the lies my opponent's telling.
Yeah.
And nothing to do with Spectrum. And it was actually, I think, 2 or 3 ads that we wanted to put on the cable channels. Friday, they accepted the buy to run the ads this week, and then we get an email from our buyer, the person who goes out and purchases the commercials, on Tuesday afternoon saying, as of 3 p.m. on Tuesday afternoon, Spectrum has taken down all of your ads, not just the one that deals with Spectrum, but every single ad.
Wow.
And this is at the same time that they have decided to run ads for Claudia Tenney.
Yeah, so they can't do that.
And they can't do that. The law says that if you're going to run ads for one candidate, you have to give the other candidate equal time, and they weren't doing that to us.
And all this equal time stuff, a lot when we always offer it here, just out of fairness, but there's really not a complete requirement once you get below the congressional races.
They don't have to run either of our ads.
Right, they could.
But
they
once
could
they
refuse
accept
both.
one, they have to accept the other.
Yeah, Andrew, can you tilt that microphone? Which, by the way, that mic sounds awful. We got to switch that mic out. It's like day 3.
So our engineer was in here working on this. I don't hear what you're hearing.
It doesn't matter. Only matters that I hear it. I'm telling you, it's bad.
I don't know how to fix it, though, if I can't hear it.
The only way
is
to
what
fix
I'm
it
saying.
is to replace the microphone.
Okay.
Like go into OUR studio and pull out that microphone. It's terrible. It's muddy. Anyway, sorry.
That's all right.
You sound muddy.
I'm muddy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Anyway, so what then? If they didn't tell you, why are they telling the OD that they did? They informed your campaign.
They did not.
And they're running. Are they running them now?
They are running them now. They informed us as of yesterday. We got an email from our buyer around 2:30 yesterday after I did the news conference that they were now running the ads. They claimed that they said that on Wednesday. We never got any notice on Wednesday that they were running the ads. But the ads now are on. I'm glad they're following the law as they're supposed to do.
So how do they make up for what didn't run?
Well, I mean, I guess they have to credit us the time or whatever it is.
Because it
really
was
sure
for a week or 2 weeks or whatever
it was a few days. I mean, it
would be considered unequal.
Exactly. So
right?
I guess they gotta make us whole and continue to run the ads whatever time they owe us because we did make the purchase and they unilaterally took them down on Tuesday. So, but now they're up and running.
So when I talked to you yesterday, as you had said they were going to refund you the money for the ad purchase. So when they told you yesterday, or when you had been notified yesterday after the press conference they were going to run them again, was there any mention of finances?
There's no mention of finances. I assume, and the buyer, I guess, would know more than I do on this topic, but they have to, whatever we purchase, they have to give us that time. So, and that's my understanding is what they're going to do.
All right. Polling recently came out, and it shows that this is a tight race. I mean, it shows you up by what? This was a Siena poll. Is that the story you did, Jeff?
Yes.
2 points, up by 2 points.
Right.
So you're in the margin of error, but this shows us a very, very tight race.
Oh, it's gonna be a battle. I mean, being up in polls is a nice thing, but the poll that really matters is what happens on election day. That's why I've been working so hard, getting out there, talking to folks throughout the congressional district, spending a lot of time in the other counties that don't know me as well. I haven't represented those areas in the state assembly, so I'm trying to get out there and meet people. And I'm trying to use illustrations like what's happening with Spectrum Cable as a reason why folks should vote for me over Claudia Tenney. I mean, Spectrum is, to me, the worst example of a corporation abusing their power. They have a monopoly in this area. I've spoken out against them in my role as a state assembly member about the high prices that they're charging consumers, about them not expanding their service into rural areas, and they don't like that. And they have the monopoly, and it's scary. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you should be concerned that there's a cable company who has a monopoly who can censor a political candidate like that. And you should be even more concerned that that company is helping to fund my opponent's campaign because she helped pass a tax cut that gave them $9 billion in a tax cut. So that's a concern.
I want to talk about the op-ed. The presidential op-ed that was in the New York Times. What's your take on it? What do you think?
Well, it seems like there's a lot of chaos going on in the White House right now, and they got to get that under control. I'm not sure where it's coming from. You want the president to succeed. You want people working together to get things done for this country. And it looks like there's a lot of chaos right now, which distracts us from the issues that are important. I mean, we have major concerns with immigration, with tax reform, with health care. People's premiums are going up. People are worried about Social Security and Medicare. There's big issues that have to be worked on, but this is a distraction from that. And I understand it's a political season, and that's going to happen. Yeah. But at the end of the day, we just got to get through all this nonsense and actually start working together. And people wake up in the morning in this area, they don't care about the op-eds in the New York Times. What they care about is the fact that their health insurance premiums are going up. They're worried about losing their job. They're worried about big tax cuts going to companies like Spectrum and other major corporations. They're worried about Social Security and Medicare. Those are the issues they want to hear about, and that's what we're trying to talk about in this campaign.
When Claudia Tenney talks about how upstate is doing better, you don't necessarily agree that the tax cuts, those tax breaks, in your commercials you talk about how it's benefited the ultra wealthy. Has it trickled down to people's paychecks?
It hasn't. You look at where the benefits of this tax bill went. 80% of the benefits in this tax bill went to the biggest corporations in this country and the wealthiest 1% in this country. I'm all for tax cuts, but I want tax cuts that are going to go to the small businesses, folks in the middle class, working individuals. You look at, there was a survey done by Newsweek magazine that looked at all the Fortune 500 companies in this country, your Walmarts, your Home Depots, your Charter Communications, and it looked at all the employees that work for these companies, and it showed that of all these employees, only 4% of them saw any increase in their wages after this tax cut. And 490 of these companies said they have absolutely no intention of sharing the increased revenue now they're taking in with their workers. But what are they doing with their tax cut? As of most recently, over $1 trillion in stock buybacks to enrich their shareholders. Any benefit that people are seeing in a tax cut is getting eaten up in higher gas prices, which are now at a 2-year high. Procter & Gamble announced they're raising consumer goods 5% in all stores this fall. You're paying more in health insurance premiums now because of the repeal of the individual mandate in the tax bill. So whatever benefit you may have seen in the tax cut is going to get eaten up in higher costs that you're now paying to these major corporations who, by the way, were the biggest beneficiaries under this tax cut. That's an insult to people in this area. And if you're living paycheck to paycheck before this tax cut in this district, the chances are you're still living paycheck to paycheck, but you're paying a whole lot more for your cable bill, your prescription drugs, and your health insurance.
How does this race work out? When you think about this, pretty much most people probably made up their minds in this who they're going to vote for, whether they're voting for you or they're voting for Claudia Tenney. And I'm assuming there is that group in the middle. What was the undecided that came out of that poll?
I'm not sure. I think it was somewhere around 10% or something like that.
That's probably bigger than I would think, but maybe the norm, right, I guess, for a race like this. So how do you convince those people? And then the other part is, how do you convince those? And we've heard it from time after time, people that say, I just can't trust that Anthony will not align himself with Nancy Pelosi.
Well, I always tell people, look at my record in the state right now, okay, and what I've done over the last 7 years. You know, she's out there with her Congressional Leadership Fund, which is the super PAC funded by all these billionaires who were the biggest beneficiaries under the tax cut. They've spent over $1 million in the last month on all these negative ads trying to paint me as Governor Cuomo or Nancy Pelosi or Sheldon Silver. Here's the facts. The facts are I have stood independent of the governor on numerous occasions, and I've been on this show talking about it. I didn't vote for his SAFE Act. He didn't like that. I stood up against him on public education issues, voted against a testing bill, which I thought was harmful to our teachers and students. He didn't like that. Stood up against him on economic development issues, held a State of the State in Utica with an empty chair for the governor here because I felt he was not paying attention to this area.
Yeah.
So I stood up to leaders in my own party. I helped oust Sheldon Silver When he had his troubles, I was part of a group of newer members that stood up to Sheldon
That
Silver.
was in the New York Times.
That was in the Wall Street Journal.
Wall Street Journal.
If you want to look at the article, it's called "When Silver Dug In, Young Guns Revolted." Go Google it and talk about how I was one of a group of members in the Assembly who actually stood up against Sheldon Silver, the leader of my own party. And then look at what I've said about Nancy Pelosi. I'm not voting for her. If you want someone who's independent, who has a history and a track record of working with both Democrats and Republicans to get things done, then I would encourage people to give me some consideration in this election. If you want someone who doesn't work well with local officials, who never criticizes folks in her own party, and is taking all kinds of money from these special interest groups who are raising prices on consumers in this area, then Claudia Tenney's your person. But if you want someone who's going to actually go there and fight for you, please give me some consideration in November.
Okay. Anybody else have anything?
I want to ask you about this Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and then this, I'm blanking on the name, but the woman from Massachusetts that just won. What is your take on this growing popularity of some of their far-left ideas?
Look,
or do you think that's just a regional thing?
It's hard to say what that translates to across the country. Here's what I always say. Compromise is not a dirty word, and I really feel that what's the biggest problem in our country right now is that if you're not to the far left, you're not a true Democrat, or if you're not to the far right, you're not a true Republican. The days of working together have to come back in our country. That's something that has always got us through the times. And my son and I, we were watching the movie Lincoln. And you look at Congress, what the approval rating of Congress is, and the story behind Lincoln is passage of the 13th Amendment, ending slavery. And we were talking about some of the great things that Congress can actually accomplish in our country and what they have done over the course of time. Medicare, Social Security, these kinds of programs. These are things that have happened by Democrats and Republicans coming together and getting things done. John McCain said it great when he said, before he passed away, we should not be looking in Congress, how do we get this bill passed with just Republican support, or how do we get this bill passed with just Democratic support? We should be asking ourselves, how do we get this bill passed with both Democratic and Republican support? Because that's going to make a better bill in the end for everybody in this country, and it's going to create more buy-in, and people are going to accept it. Let's stop retreating to the left and the right and actually start working together and getting things done.
Wayne has a question in Utica. Wayne, you're on with Assemblyman Anthony Brindisi. I got him now. Good morning, Wayne.
Hey guys, Mr. Brindisi, I just want to know, did you back that nano crap that went on up there at SUNY, and did you back the Buffalo Billions? And if you did, what do you got to say about the outcome? And do you still support Cuomo?
Well, I mean, did I support the
Cuomo supporting thing is in a commercial, and it came from this show actually,
sure.
and I'd like to have that in context too.
Sure, absolutely.
You can tell what Wayne thinks about nano. He's calling it the nano crap.
Well, it's a commercial. It's a commercial that the Congressional Leadership Fund is running. But if that company came through and there were jobs here, would he call it crap? I don't think so.
Yeah, but when it didn't come through, you guys spent a lot of money that could have been used somewhere
Wayne,
else.
You're incorrect, Wayne. There's no money that's been spent on that project, despite what you're seeing in the commercials and you're repeating here on the air.
Got put up for free?
Despite what you're saying on the air and repeating from the commercials, the money that was allocated for the Nano project has not been spent. It's sitting in the state budget. It's been secured, and there are still active negotiations in place with companies to try and bring them here. At the end of the day, if we can bring a company here and create jobs, I think it's a good thing for our region. That's why I supported the project, as did Senator Griffo, as did other members of the legislature who worked to try and do that. My job here is to fight for this area, to try and secure funding for this area, to try and bring jobs to this area. Did we have a setback with AMS? Absolutely. Am I disappointed in that? Absolutely. Did I go out and criticize the governor for his role in that? Absolutely. I held a State of the State address with an empty chair for the governor because I felt he was ignoring the area after that happened. So
what caused it?
I'm sorry?
What caused it? What caused the back out?
Delays in the project because of delays in the timeline for the project. The company could no longer wait around and had to make other plans, and that's why they decided to move to another area. That's what happened.
You had Caballeros, that mess that. And you could, it almost felt like when we talked Pacenti, Griffo, everybody kind of felt that this project was being slowed in Albany, and you were about to lose it. and it was like a truck going down a hill without brakes.
Before the project, before we lost the project, you can read about it too. Senator Griffin and I traveled to the State Fair in Syracuse to blow the alarm and tell the governor, you need to get yourself focused on this because you're going to lose this project. This company is not going to sit around forever. The project was being run out of Albany, which was unfortunate. It should have been run here locally more, and we did everything we could to try and prevent that from happening. But because of delays in the project, the company had to make other plans. I'm disappointed in that, but I'm happy that we were able to secure that funding because I don't want to see that funding go to another part of the state. We fought for that funding, and it should be used for us to help attract another company. And there still is ongoing searches for companies to come here.
Hold on, Wayne. All right, Wayne, go ahead.
What's going on with the whole Buffalo thing and the Buffalo billion thing? And do you support Cuomo to go for another term?
I'm not making any endorsements in the governor's race. The Buffalo money was part of a state budget years ago that I vote for. Senator Griffin voted for, along with other things in the budget like education funding, funding for health care, funding for veterans programs, funding for individuals with developmental disabilities. I mean, there's all kinds of things that go into a state budget. So trying to say that I supported that particular funding, was it part of a budget that I voted for? Sure. I don't know what I could say about that.
All right. I'll give you one more question there, Wayne.
You support Remington Arms and guns.
Absolutely.
What's your view?
Wayne, I voted against the SAFE Act because of my concerns of how that would impact the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding gun owners in this region. It was a bill that was rushed through in the night, and I had concerns about how that would impact workers at Remington Arms. I've always had the support of the workers there, and I'll do anything I can to fight for the workers there, whether the union supports me in this campaign or not. That's an important employer for our region, and I'll go to bat for them every single time, as I have done in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Brindisi, and Kyle Luke and the guys over here at Remington do a good job.
They all do an excellent job, and it's an important company for our area, and those workers are great workers. They can't do that work anywhere else because the workers here in Ilion are so good.
Thank you.
All right, Wayne, thanks, man. And you want to try one more? I can throw one more at
sure.
you.
I like taking questions, Bill.
Ray, you're on Ray in Whitesboro, on with Anthony Brindisi.
Okay, Mr. Brindisi, now...
Call me Anthony, Ray.
Okay, Anthony. I have two questions that I'm concerned about, and I've been talking with other people about it. And with the news media, there's conflict with what's honest and what isn't. Sure. I have the two questions. Is one for the Medicare with Penny. How can you find out what they're saying, how she voted over $450 million against, or $1 billion, whatever it was, against Medicare?
Yep.
And then the other one is the $9 billion for the spectrum. How do you find out if those
charges
are true or not?
Okay.
So those are claims that I've made in commercials that I've put out there, and I can provide you with documentation to show that. And you can, it's hard to see on the commercial sometimes, but you can see how we, unlike the congressional leadership who cites all kinds of things against me in commercials and does never cite a source for their claims, I actually back up my information with actual sources of where I'm getting these claims from. So in terms of the money that Claudia Tenney voted for to take out of Medicare, I can provide you with that documentation. I don't know if I could hang on to Ray afterwards, and I'll get her phone number if you're willing to, and I'll call you afterwards and give you that documentation. And the $9 billion that Spectrum got, that's the I off the top of my head, I can't think of the article that comes from, but there's several articles out there that talks about the benefit that Charter Communications, which owns Spectrum, got from the tax bill. It's $9.3 billion in a tax cut.
All right, why don't you hold on, Ray, and we'll get your information, and you can follow up with Anthony afterwards.
Okay, thank you so much.
You, Ray.
Sit tight, Davey Keeper, okay, and Manaski.
Just a quick thing on the Nano.
Yes.
Obviously, some buildings were built, but what was... I'm trying to think of the number that's in the commercial. Is it $500 million?
$585 million.
Yeah. So what of that balance is still available to this area, and what was it to be used for? I mean, obviously there was
the majority of it is still available to this area. There's some money that's been spent for infrastructure improvements and things like that, but the bulk of that funding is still in the state budget. So when they say that money's been wasted or spent, that's ridiculous, because that money is still there. It's sitting in the state budget, and it's allocated for Oneida County to use to attract a computer chip manufacturer to that particular area of land. And there are still ongoing talks with several companies to try and do that. And I hope we can get one of those companies, because that's going to be good for this area. So that
Wouldn't
money
you like
is
it to
still
happen
there.
by October? Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be great to happen. I wish it happened last October.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's something that I've worked on and I want to see, because I want jobs for people in this area. That's what we need in here. I'm going to do whatever I can to fight in Albany and Washington to try and bring jobs to this area. That money is still there, and it can be used. You do have a company that's right on the SUNY Poly campus now, Danfoss, which is a success. They are growing. They expect to be up to 300 workers, I think, by the end of next year. And that's a good company, a German company that has a partnership with GE to do manufacturing, and that's thriving right now and growing.
Okay. And I want to say that we always do, and we will invite, again, Claudia Tenney. And we don't screen phone calls. I mean, we obviously screen them, but anybody who calls in gets a chance to get in. We don't know who's calling in. And it's a great opportunity, because you're sitting there and you're negotiating to convince people to vote for you.
Yeah.
And we're giving you that opportunity. She could have the same opportunity. She doesn't take advantage of it. So just for the record, we'll reach out again and give her the same equal time that we've offered to you. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much. We'll be looking for your commercials on Spectrum.
Well, today.
And one thing, and Jeff brought this up yesterday, because it is confusing, right? And you're in the business.
Yeah.
And it's confusing for you.
Because
Explain.
when I'm a Spectrum customer, right? So if I flip into the channels, I don't know what channel it's on.
Right.
I see your ads.
You will
and then
see-
I hear you
people
saying,
do get
well, they won't
confused.
run my ad. So
So you got to break it down two ways. You have broadcast channels, so you have KTV, WUTR, WFXV. Those are the local affiliates, and that's separate from Spectrum. Even though you have Spectrum Cable and you see your KTV on Spectrum Cable, those are local affiliates. They're over-the-air channels. You can get them through a satellite.
And to go further,
antenna.
on that, for somebody who does this as well, when you buy a commercial and you want to get it on WKTV on Spectrum, you can't go to Spectrum.
No, you buy
it through
right to
KTV, and they
KTV.
just take their feed and they put it over Spectrum. But the difference is,
if you want to see, so Spectrum controls the cable channels. So CNN, Fox, HGTV, Sci-Fi, all those stations, History Channel. Sure. Those are the channels that Spectrum controls.
Okay.
And those are the stations where you would not see my commercial up until yesterday.
Okay. And imagine what it's like for just the average consumer. Jeff is in the business, right? And it was confusing for everybody in the studio here.
Right.
Yeah. So imagine what it's like for the average consumer that's saying, I don't know, my Spectrum's showing his ads.
We get emails from folks or messages to the Facebook page saying, I just saw your ad. Well,
you wouldn't see it on Trading Spaces or any of those programs.
Right.
So.
Beachfront Homes. Or
Right. My
wife's even a show.
My wife likes that show where they go on the ship and all the people argue when they're taking care of the millionaires. That you familiar with that?
Oh, Shark Tank?
No, the yacht show.
Oh, the yacht show.
Down Under in the Yacht. All these programs.
You don't follow anymore.
Those are cable programs, and your spots would not air there, but they are now.
They are now.
All right, fair enough.
I'll just throw.
Is Lifetime a cable network?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So are you?
No, that's up on Smith Hill.
We talked about. You talked about. You had put a buy-in with Spectrum, and then they canceled your ads earlier this week.
Correct.
And now they've got what you paid for. They got to run. Right.
Exactly.
What about? I mean, you've been ringing this bell like a couple months ago.
Right.
So what about all that time? Are you going to file a complaint with the FCC?
Look, we don't. I don't want to file a complaint with the FCC. I want them to do the right thing. If they continue to do this to us, if they're going to continue to run her ads and then give us a hard time and play games with us about running our ads, then we will end up filing a formal complaint. So far, we've been able to work it out by talking to their lawyers and engaging the FCC, but no written complaints have been filed. Okay. But if they continue to do this, I'll do whatever I have to do to make sure that my information gets out there.
And time is ticking. I mean, the race is
it's November.
Underway
it's
here.
Less than 2 months away.
The race has been underway for a long time. And then finally, we've gone extra time, and keep track of this time because I want to make sure we offer Claudia Tenney the exact same amount of time. But I do want to ask you from a news standpoint, what's the story on Spectrum? They basically were being kicked out of the state. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. Is this going to bring them to the point where they're going to work to get into some of those more rural areas? Is there any progress being made?
There's some talks going on. They have been asked to leave the state. They have indicated that they will fight that.
Yeah.
There's been an extension of time to give them to try and comply with the agreements that they made. The biggest one is they agreed to expand to a certain number of households that are underserved. You go in areas outside of Utica and even in places like in Rome, you can't get Spectrum cable.
Yeah.
So they've agreed to, they're being forced, as they have agreed to do, to go into areas to provide service. We'll see if they comply with that. And if not, then I would encourage the state to take whatever action they can to get Spectrum to comply. The funny thing is, and I'll just mention this because this is something that my opponent will say, she'll say, well, it was under Anthony Brindisi that Spectrum merged here in New York State. Spectrum merged back in May of 2016, okay? I'll remind my opponent that she was in the assembly also back in May of 2016, but she may forget because she missed a lot of votes back then, so she wasn't really around a lot. So I have to remind her about that. But in any event, the state assembly has absolutely zero say over the mergers that take place in the state of New York. It's the Public Service Commission that approves any mergers, not the state assembly.
I was driving on the thruway the other day, and I almost got into an accident with a lane change because I was focused on a beautiful Burger King sign on the side of the highway. So the feds are coming in and saying you got to take all, and you can clearly see on the thruway. It's a tourism,
and in some cases they do them like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, there's
in
a
close
lot
proximity.
And honestly, I kind of like them. They look nice. They also seem to be promoting local areas and things that you can get. However, the feds are saying that these are a distraction and funding ends, or there's been a fine. The fine won't be released. We have till September 30th. What do you know about that?
Just what I read in the paper that there's a certain number of days.
As an assemblyman, do you play any role in that?
No, I mean that's something that was allocated through the governor's office through part of the I Love New York tourism campaign that they put these signs up. My criticism back then, and I was vocal about it, that many of these signs were promoting New York State products and New York State tourism. And some of those signs were made in Arkansas when we have companies here actually right in the Mohawk Valley that can manufacture those kinds of signs. That was my criticism back then when those signs went up. I like the idea of promoting tourism in New York State and New York State products. That's a great thing. And I hope the state can work with the federal government. It'd be nice to have some help from our federal representatives who are here to work with the federal government so New York State does not get fined. But I think promoting tourism is a good thing for our state.
I'm going to give the listener one final say. We've gone extra time here, and I'm way over, and I'm getting the eye from Jeff over there, who's the commercial, and a free money question, by the way. Hobike has given the eye as well. I'll give Richard one shot. He's been waiting in New Hartford. Richard, you're on with Assemblyman Anthony Brindisi.
I got a question about the hospital. I know you're a big proponent of the hospital downtown, but how can a private corporation use eminent domain to evict those people from that area?
Well,
I don't understand that.
They're not a private corporation. They're a not-for-profit entity, which is a little different. But for healthcare purposes, and look, I hope it doesn't come to eminent domain. I know what the public knows at this point in terms of where they are in the negotiations with several of the property owners, and hopefully that doesn't have to happen, and that there's some kind of an agreement that they can reach over those buildings.
I have a friend that has a church in that area, and he says they're not leaving, they're not moving, and I hear his side of the story, and it's horrible. It's horrible what they're doing to those people. And, I would vote for you, but that hospital thing kind of, I don't like that. But I agree with you with Spectrum.
Well, there's many.
I bill every month, and they're horrible.
I'd encourage you to look at all the issues, Richard. Not just one issue. There's lots of issues that we can talk about, especially in the congressional race. And if you want to have a conversation about the hospital, I'm happy to sit down and talk to you. If you want to provide your phone number to the station here, I'll give you a call afterwards, and we can talk about it.
I don't think you realize how many people are against it. But good luck, Anthony.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, but bye-bye.
Thanks, Richard. It's a hot topic. And by the way, the MVHS is not handling any part of it does get confusing. Any part of eminent domain. That's something that the municipalities are doing, and particularly the counties.
But would that be a congressional? I mean, I understand Richard's passion about the project, but that wouldn't be something that would really have any relevance to.
In fairness, your assembly record, you're part of this hospital project. Your assembly record is relevant.
It's very clear. I mean, I worked with Senator Griffo to help secure the funding. I've been a supporter of the hospital. I support their decision to go downtown, and That's
it.
Pretty well known.
All right, 7:45. We've gone long. Thanks for taking the time. You've actually turned grayer since you've been on the air here today. I'm just kidding. It's not true. I envy your hair. All right, Anthony Brindisi, thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
We'll do it again.